The desert sun burned like fire that morning. Heat waves danced over the runway, and the air felt heavy with tension. Soldiers moved fast, their boots thumping against the steel floor of the hangar. The base was alive, filled with noise, orders, and the smell of jet fuel. Before we dive into video, please subscribe our channel. In the middle of all that chaos stood a giant, the AH-64 Apache helicopter. It was the pride of the entire base, a beast built for war. But today it was silent. Its engine was dead. Inside the hangar, a group of engineers surrounded the helicopter. Sweat rolled down their faces as they argued over tools, screens, and blueprints. "Start it again," one of them said. Another shook his head. "We've done that 10 times. It's not responding." Lieutenant Brooks walked in, his uniform spotless, his expression anything but calm. "Talk to me," he ordered. One of the engineers, a young man with grease all over his hands, stepped forward nervously. "Sir, we've checked everything. Fuel flow, ignition, hydraulics, all good. But the engine won't start. It's refusing to wake up," Brooks frowned. "We have a mission in less than 24 hours. If that bird isn't flying, the operation fails." The hangar went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Mission failure wasn't an option. Hours passed. The sound of tools hitting metal echoed like thunder. The crew tried everything, replacing sensors, rewiring panels, even swapping out modules. Nothing worked. The Apache just sat there, lifeless. By afternoon, frustration had filled the room like thick smoke. One mechanic threw his wrench on the floor. "Sir, maybe it's time to request backup from command." Brooks looked at him coldly. "You think they'll send a new Apache overnight? We're on our own." Just then, a young technician named Davis spoke up softly, almost like he was afraid of being heard. "There's someone who might be able to help." Brooks turned sharply. "Who?" Davis hesitated. "He used to work here. A long time ago. Name's Walter Kane. Old guy. Retired master mechanic. My dad told me stories about him. Said he could fix anything." Brooks raised an eyebrow. "A retired mechanic? You're telling me a man who left years ago can fix what my best engineers can't?" Davis swallowed hard. "Sir, they called him the Whisperer of Engines. Said he could hear problems others couldn't even see." The hangar fell silent again. Even the soldiers who were pretending not to listen now looked curious. Brooks crossed his arms. "Where is he now?" "Last I heard," Davis replied, "he runs a small repair shop outside the old airfield, about 50 miles from here." Brooks exhaled slowly. He didn't believe in legends, but he did believe in results. "Get him! Bring him here before nightfall." By late evening, the base was quiet. The heat had faded into a cool wind, and the sun disappeared behind the mountains. At the gate, an old dusty pickup truck rolled in. Its engine sputtered like it was on its last breath. Behind the wheel sat an old man with silver hair, wearing a faded blue jumpsuit. His eyes were calm, sharp, like a man who had seen everything and still wasn't impressed. "Walter Kane?" the guard asked. The old man nodded. "They called me." When he stepped out of the truck, the young soldiers nearby whispered to each other. He looked more like someone's grandfather than a military engineer. His back was slightly bent, his hands rough, his boots worn. But there was something about his presence. Something that made even the cocky new recruits go quiet. Brooks was waiting near the hangar doors when Walter arrived. "You must be the legend I've heard so much about," he said, not bothering to hide his doubt. Walter smiled faintly. "Legend? That's a big word. I just fix things." Brooks motioned him inside. "You'll have your chance. Follow me." When Walter stepped into the hangar, the entire team stopped what they were doing. Every eye turned to the old man in blue. Some looked curious. Others looked amused. One young engineer whispered to another, "This old guy's gonna fix an Apache?" "Yeah, right." Walter walked straight up to the helicopter. His eyes scanned it slowly. The wings, the rotors, the burned-out engine. He touched the metal gently, almost like greeting an old friend. "Who started her last?" he asked. The room stayed quiet until Davis spoke. "I did, sir. The system died right after ignition." Walter nodded and crouched beside the engine. He placed his hand near the cooling vents and listened. Everyone watched, confused. Brooks finally asked, "What are you doing?" Walter smiled slightly. "Listening. Every machine speaks. Most people just don't understand the language." The soldiers exchanged glances. Some chuckled quietly. Brooks folded his arms but didn't stop him. After a few minutes, Walter stood up and asked for a wrench and flashlight. He started working. Slow, steady, confident. Every move he made seemed deliberate, like he already knew the problem. The others gathered around, curious now. He disconnected a small valve, wiped it clean, then tapped the side of the engine twice. "There's your problem," he said softly. One of the engineers frowned. "That's just a coolant regulator," Walter nodded. "Exactly. It's clogged. When the system overheated, it tripped your ignition failsafe. You kept trying to restart it without releasing the pressure. She's not broken. She's suffocating. Brooks blinked. Are you telling me this $30 million helicopter is down because of a clogged valve? Walter shrugged. Machines don't care about money, Lieutenant. They care about respect. He reassembled the part, tightened the bolts, and stepped back. Try it now. The engineer hesitated, then pressed the ignition. For a moment, silence. Then, with a deep metallic roar, the Apache's engine came to life. The rotors began to spin slowly, the lights flickering to green. Everyone stared in disbelief. The machine that had refused to move all day was now alive and humming smoothly. Brooks turned to Walter, astonished. How did you… Walter simply wiped his hands with an old rag. Experience, son, and a little bit of listening. The hangar erupted with cheers. Davis grinned wide. He did it. The old man actually did it. Walter smiled faintly and turned toward the exit. You've got your bird back. Take care of her. As he walked away, Brooks called out, We might still need you tomorrow. Walter paused at the door, his silhouette framed by the golden light of the setting sun. Then I'll be here at dawn, he said, his voice calm but firm. Outside, the desert wind blew softly, carrying the sound of the Apache's engine, alive once more, echoing across the horizon. And for the first time that day, the base felt hope again. The next morning began with the sound of engines warming up across the base. The desert air was still cool, and the golden sunrise painted the hangars in shades of red and orange. Inside the main hangar, the AH-64 Apache stood tall and ready, a sleeping beast that had finally been awakened. Mechanics moved around it, checking systems and preparing for the test flight. But despite the cheerful mood, there was an invisible tension in the air. Something didn't feel right. Lieutenant Brooks walked in, his uniform crisp as always. His eyes went straight to the helicopter. Is it ready? Davis nodded. All systems green, sir. She's humming perfectly. Brooks crossed his arms. Good. Then why does everyone look nervous? No one answered. A few mechanics glanced toward the far corner of the hangar, where Walter Kane sat quietly on an old metal chair, sipping coffee from a tin mug. He looked calm, almost too calm. Brooks walked over. You've been here since dawn? Walter smiled faintly. Old habits die hard. I like to make sure my work holds through the night. Brooks studied him for a moment. You really think your quick fix will survive a full-power flight test? Walter raised his eyes. Lieutenant, if it doesn't, you'll know before anyone else. Machines always tell the truth. Brooks didn't know what to say. He turned to Davis. Prepare for engine run-up. The hangar came alive. Technicians scrambled to their stations, plugging in data cables and checking readouts. The massive rotors began to spin slowly, blades cutting through the air with a low rhythmic hum. The sound grew louder, deeper, a thunder that echoed across the desert. Then suddenly, a sharp metallic click broke through the noise. The rotor stopped. Every head turned. The monitors flickered. A warning light flashed on the main control panel. Engine pressure drop, shouted one of the technicians. Brooks rushed forward. Shut it down, now! The power was cut, and silence filled the hangar again. The crew looked at each other, confusion and fear mixing in their eyes. Brooks glared at Walter. You said it was fixed. Walter stood slowly, setting his mug aside. His expression was unreadable. It is fixed, but something else isn't right. He walked to the helicopter, ignoring the murmurs around him. He touched the engine casing with his palm and closed his eyes for a moment, as if listening again. Brooks whispered to Davis. Does he always do that? Davis shrugged nervously. Sir, he's different. Walter opened his eyes and said quietly, You ran the test too early. Brooks frowned. What are you talking about? The engine hasn't balanced yet, Walter said, kneeling beside the Apache. It's like waking someone up and asking them to sprint. You'll trip the sensors. Brooks clenched his jaw. You expect me to believe that? Walter didn't answer. He just opened a small side panel and looked inside. What? Brooks asked. Small side panel and looked inside. What? Brooks asked. Walter pulled out a small blackened piece of wire. Half melted, the insulation burned away. This wasn't here yesterday. The crew gathered around, staring at the wire. Davis said in disbelief, That looks like it was cut. Walter's eyes narrowed. Not cut! Tampered. The room went silent. Brooks' voice hardened. You're saying someone tried to sabotage the Apache? Walter met his gaze. I'm saying someone didn't want it to fly. A chill swept through the hangar. For the first time, the problem didn't feel mechanical. It felt human. Brooks motioned to two guards. Lock the doors. No one leaves until we figure this out. The soldiers obeyed instantly. The huge steel doors closed with a deep clang. Walter studied the wire again. This isn't an accident. Whoever did this knows engines, and knows how to make it look like a system fault. Davis looked pale. But why would anyone do that? We're all on the same side. Walter's voice was calm but heavy. Not always. Brooks ran a hand through his hair. You're suggesting there's a traitor on base? I'm suggesting someone has a reason to stop that helicopter from flying, Walter replied. The question is, why? Outside, the sun had risen fully, and heat began to pour into the hangar. Inside, tension rose just as fast. Brooks ordered everyone to gather. Until further notice, this hangar is on lockdown. Nobody touches that helicopter except me or Mr. Kane, understood? The crew nodded uneasily. Walter walked toward the back of the hangar, inspecting the tool benches and storage cabinets. He stopped when he noticed something strange. A small trail of oil leading to a corner near the emergency exit. He crouched down, running his finger through the dark streak. Fresh, he muttered. Less than an hour old. Brooks joined him. Someone was here. Walter nodded. And in a hurry. They followed the oil trail until it stopped near a set of stacked crates. Walter pushed one aside, revealing a small open compartment beneath. Inside lay a set of worn gloves, a screwdriver, and a crumpled note. Brooks picked up the note. The handwriting was rough, rushed. Don't trust the systems. It's bigger than you think. Brooks looked at Walter. What does that mean? Walter's face darkened. It means this isn't about one helicopter. Before Brooks could reply, a loud boom echoed from outside. The sound of a fuel drum tipping over. Soldiers rushed toward the noise, but the moment they opened the side door, a gust of hot air and smoke swept in. Fire at the storage yard. Someone shouted. Brooks cursed. Move! Get the fire crew out there! Everyone ran to their stations. In the chaos, Walter remained still, watching the Apache through the rising smoke. His instincts screamed that the fire was no accident. It was a distraction. He turned sharply, scanning the room, and caught a glimpse of movement near the shadows behind the fuel tanks. A figure in dark uniform slipped away through the smoke. Hey! Walter shouted, running after him. Brooks saw it too. Guards! Stop that man! But it was too late. The figure disappeared into the desert beyond the fence. When the fire was finally under control, Brooks stood beside Walter, both staring at the now dark horizon. Brooks said quietly, You were right. Someone's trying to sabotage us. Walter's voice was firm. No, Lieutenant. They're trying to send a message. Brooks turned. Message? What kind of message? Walter looked at the Apache, its metal skin reflecting the flickering lights of the hangar. His eyes were sharp, distant, as if he was remembering something from long ago. The kind, he said softly, that comes before something much worse. The hangar lights flickered once, then twice, and went dark. The only sound left was the faint ticking of cooling metal, and the low, eerie hum of the Apache systems coming back online, by themselves. Brooks froze. Did you touch anything? Walter whispered. No. They both stared as the cockpit lights flickered again. This time, steady and bright, and on the main control screen, a single word appeared in red, override. The hangar was silent except for the faint hum coming from the Apache's control panel. The word override glowed in red on the main screen like a warning from another world. Lieutenant Brooks stood frozen, his heart pounding. What in the world is going on? Walter Kane stepped closer, his sharp eyes scanning the flickering lights. That's not a normal error code, he said quietly. This command had to come from an external source. External? Brooks repeated. You mean someone's controlling it remotely? Walter didn't answer right away. He tapped a few buttons on the side console, but the system refused to respond. Whatever this is, it's military-grade encryption. Someone out there still has access to this helicopter's control network. Brooks turned to Davis. Cut the power. Pull the cables now. Davis ran to the circuit board and hit the emergency switch. The hangar went dark as every light blinked out. The hum died instantly, leaving only the sound of their breathing. Brooks exhaled. Finally, but Walter wasn't convinced. Don't relax yet. He leaned closer to the Apache. That override didn't come from inside the base. It came from somewhere far away. And someone wanted us to see it. Brooks rubbed his forehead. Why would anyone do that? This is just one helicopter. Walter gave him a long look. Lieutenant, there's no such thing as just one Apache. Every machine tells a story. And this one might hold something they want buried. Before Brooks could respond, a soldier ran into the hangar. Sir, you need to see this! They followed him outside to the security control room. The monitors showed grainy footage from the night before. The mysterious figure who had fled through the desert. Brooks pointed. Pause there. Zoom in. The image sharpened slightly. revealing a man in tactical gear, carrying a small black case. But the face was covered. Walter's expression changed. "I've seen that stance before," he murmured. "You recognize him?" Brooks asked. Walter hesitated. "Maybe, but it can't be." He leaned closer to the screen. "Unless—" Before he could finish, the monitor flickered and went black. "Power surge!" shouted one of the technicians. "We just lost feed to the external cameras." Brooks slammed his hand on the desk. "How? We just replaced the cables last month." Walter turned toward him slowly. "Someone doesn't want us to find that man." Brooks frowned. "You keep saying someone. Who are we talking about, Mr. Kane?" Walter took a deep breath. "Years ago, I worked on a classified upgrade for the Apache program. Something that wasn't on any official record. We built a prototype control chip that allowed remote command access, even when the aircraft was grounded." Brooks' eyes widened. "You're telling me this Apache still has that chip?" Walter nodded grimly. "It was never supposed to be active. The project was buried. But if someone reactivated it?" He looked toward the hangar. "Then this isn't sabotage. It's retrieval." "Retrieval of what?" Brooks asked. Walter's voice dropped. "Data. There's mission intel stored inside the chip. Something that could expose operations the world never knew existed." Brooks stepped back. "So the man who broke in, he wasn't trying to destroy the Apache. He was trying to take it." Walter nodded. "Exactly. And if he failed, he'll come back." Just then, the base intercom crackled to life. "All units, report to perimeter sector 7. Unidentified movement detected." Brooks and Walter exchanged a glance, then sprinted toward the command post. The night air was thick and heavy. Floodlights swept across the desert as soldiers took defensive positions. The hum of generators echoed in the distance. Through the binoculars, Brooks could see faint shadows moving beyond the fence line. "Infrared shows multiple heat signatures," reported a guard. "They're not ours." "Multiple heat signatures," reported a guard. "They're not ours." Walter's instincts kicked in. "They're testing our response time," he said. "They won't attack head-on." Brooks tightened his grip on his rifle. "Then what are they waiting for?" Walter pointed toward the hangar. "That." Before Brooks could reply, the hangar lights flickered again, even though the power had been cut. A single Apache rotor began to turn. Brooks shouted, "That's impossible! The engine's offline." Walter's voice was low but steady. "Not anymore." The soldiers turned toward the hangar, their weapons ready. The massive doors creaked open by themselves. Inside, the Apache's cockpit glowed bright red, the override signal now pulsing faster. Brooks shouted into his radio, "Cut the generator! Shut it all down!" But before the order could go through, the helicopter's targeting system activated. The red sensor light locked onto one of the nearby fuel trucks. "Get down!" Walter yelled. A blinding flash lit up the night. The explosion rocked the entire base. Flames shot into the sky, and debris rained down across the desert. Brooks hit the ground, ears ringing. When he looked up, the Apache was gone. "Where is it?" he shouted. A soldier pointed into the darkness. "It's flying, sir. It's flying itself!" Walter stared at the sky in disbelief. The Apache roared above them, moving fast and low, like a ghost machine brought back from the dead. Brooks grabbed his radio. "Air Command, this is Delta Base. Unauthorized aircraft airborne. Repeat, the Apache has launched on its own." Static crackled through the speaker. "No response. Communications are jammed," Davis shouted. Walter's eyes narrowed. "Then whoever did this is still controlling it. And they're close." He turned to Brooks. "We need to get to the control bunker. There's a manual override channel, but it's underground." They sprinted across the burning yard as alarms blared across the base. Smoke filled the air. The sound of the Apache's rotors thundered overhead. They reached the bunker entrance, a thick steel door built into the ground. Brooks entered his code, but the keypad flashed red. "Access denied," it read. Walter stepped forward. "Let me try." He typed a different sequence, one that no one else seemed to know. The door clicked open. Brooks stared at him. "How did you—" Walter cut him off. "Old codes, from a project that never officially existed." They descended into the dimly lit corridor below. The air was cold, filled with the faint hum of old machinery. At the end of the hall was a small control room, filled with outdated screens and dusty equipment. Walter powered it on. "This system runs on its own channel," he explained. "If we can locate the drone signal, we can override the override." Brooks gave a shaky laugh. "That even possible?" Walter smirked slightly. "It was my design." He began typing furiously, lines of code flashing across the screens. The radar picked up a signal. The Apache flying northwest, deeper into the desert. "There," Brooks pointed. "That's it!" Walter's face grew serious. "That heading, it's going toward the old test range. The one they shut down years ago." Brooks frowned. "Why there?" Walter's voice was quiet. "Because that's where it was built. A long silence followed. Then the radar beeped again. A second signal appeared, right beside the Apache. Brooks looked closer. Another aircraft? Walter shook his head slowly. No, another command source. He turned to Brooks, his eyes sharp and filled with dread. "Lieutenant," he said, "someone else is controlling this fight. And they know we're watching." The lights in the bunker flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the darkness, Walter's voice whispered, "It's starting again." The desert was silent. Only the faint echo of rotors in the distance broke the stillness of the night. The Apache flew low, its red lights flickering like the heartbeat of a ghost. Inside the underground bunker, Walter Kane worked fast, his fingers flying across the console. Lieutenant Brooks watched the radar. The helicopter's signal was moving closer to the old test range. Brooks asked, "Can we still stop it?" Walter didn't look up. "Maybe. But whoever's controlling it, they know every move we make. They're using the same access codes I built years ago." Brooks clenched his fists. "Then how do we beat someone using your own design?" Walter finally looked up. His old eyes held a quiet fire. "By doing something they'd never expect." He grabbed his jacket and started toward the door. "Where are you going?" Brooks demanded. "To end what I started," Walter said simply. The two raced across the burning horizon in a military jeep. The glow of the distant fire painted the sky red. The Apache was hovering above the old test range now, motionless, waiting. As they approached, Brooks could see something strange. Metal structures half buried in sand, remains of old prototypes, forgotten weapons, a graveyard of machines. Walter got out, walking slowly toward the center of the range. Brooks followed, shouting over the wind, "We can jam the signal from here!" Walter shook his head. "It's not enough. They'll regain control." He opened a small metal box he'd brought. Inside was an old transmitter, scratched and worn. "What's that?" Brooks asked. "The manual override beacon," Walter replied. "The one I built before they shut the project down. It connects directly to the core system, but it only works once." Brooks looked at him. "You mean it'll destroy the Apache?" Walter's voice was calm. "Not just the Apache. Every trace of the remote network, including me." Brooks froze. "No, there has to be another way." Walter smiled faintly. "There isn't. I built this system so no one could ever take control of it again. But now, someone has. I have to make sure it ends here." The Apache suddenly turned toward them, engines roaring. Its targeting laser locked onto their position. Brooks shouted, "It's seen us!" Walter stood firm. "Good. Let it see who's waiting." He lifted the transmitter and switched it on. A sharp tone filled the air. The Apache hesitated, hovering midair, its rotors slicing the night wind. "Come on," Walter whispered. "Remember who built you." The light on the transmitter blinked faster, the same pattern as the Apache's override code. Then, through the static of the radio, a voice came. "Walter Kane," it said coldly. "You should have stayed retired." Brooks looked at him in shock. "Who is that?" Walter's jaw tightened. "Someone who used to be my student." The Apache descended lower, its cannon charging. Walter pressed the final button. The transmitter glowed bright white. A pulse of energy shot through the desert. The air trembled. The Apache froze mid-air. Then its engines roared one last time before shutting down completely. The helicopter dropped to the ground, sand exploding around it. Brooks shielded his face. When the dust cleared, the Apache was silent. He turned, but Walter was lying on the ground beside the transmitter, still and peaceful. Brooks knelt beside him. "Walter, stay with me." The old man's lips curved into a faint smile. "Told you, it'd only work once." His eyes slowly closed. Brooks sat in silence as the wind carried the last echo of the explosion away. Hours later, rescue teams found the wreckage. The Apache was completely dead, its systems wiped clean, every file erased. Brooks stood alone, looking at the rising sun. Command had called Walter Kane a retired mechanic, but that morning, every soldier on the base called him something else, a hero who saved the sky. And somewhere deep in the desert, the faint sound of an engine whispered back to life. The faint sound of an engine whispered back to life.